We're in chapter 5 today of the book of Ephesians, looking at some imperatives given in this epistle to the New Testament believer like you and I. It's a wonderful epistle. If you've not read it lately, I suggest you take 25, 30 minutes and just sit down someday and read the whole book in one setting, and if possible, read it out loud. I find reading out loud it crystallizes things in my own thinking better. I pay better attention, closer attention, and it speaks to my heart to do it that way. So get alone, find a place where nobody else is, and sit down and read this book. It'll be a great blessing to you. By the time we get to chapter 5, we're deep in the heart of the applicational section of this little letter, and he keeps using the word therefore. Verse 1, therefore, he's banking what he says now on things he has already said. In the latter part of chapter 4, he's talking in verse 32, for example, about being kind to one another, and tenderhearted and graciously forgiving each other. That's where he's coming from. Therefore, and he says at the end of verse 32, just as God in Christ has also graciously forgiven you, so think of the forgiveness that is yours from God. Do you deserve his forgiveness? Well, of course not. And so his forgiveness to you is gracious. And that's the kind of God that we have, this gracious God who has forgiven you, though you certainly do not deserve it and could never merit it. Therefore, on the basis of what he just said, be imitators of God as beloved children. Now, as imitators of God, that's a high bar, isn't it? In other passages, it tells us to be imitators of Christ. The standard could not be any higher. You and I could never truly walk in the footsteps of Jesus or the Father. To be imitators of him is just beyond our capabilities, and yet we're called to do so. This is a command here. So he's not asking for the impossible, but he is telling us this is the trajectory of our lives. This should be our desire. This should be what we want to do and what we endeavor to do. We are to be imitators of him. We're to follow in his footsteps. And we're to do so as beloved children, he says here. So we're not doing so as if he was some kind of a monarch, a dictator of some sort, commanding us to do such and such. He is a beloved father, and we are his beloved children. And therefore, we want to follow him because we love him, and we do that because he loved us first. Matter of fact, in verse 2 it says, and walk in love, just as Christ also loved us and gave himself up for us as an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. Now think about that for a moment. As in particular, he could talk about many things, many ways we should imitate God. But he moves immediately to the issue of love. And he talks about walking here in love. Now remember in chapter 4, verse 1, we're to walk in a worthy manner. Now in this chapter, we're to walk in love. And our basis for walking in love, as God is loved, that basis is Christ himself. So the tangible example of the greatest love of all time is Jesus Christ. Just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. And so the cross, the work of the cross, is the epitome of love. The Lord loved us so much that he gave himself for us. The love could not be any greater than that. So he looks at us and he sees people that need forgiveness. He sees people that are sinners. He sees people that can never match the standard that he's given us here. And yet he loved us so much that he died for us and gave himself for us. It says here, as an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. So this sacrifice, this death that Christ gave for us, not only does he do that for our benefit to save us from sin, he does that, but there's also a reference to God himself as an offering and sacrifice to God. You see, the Lord has a righteous, just, holy anger against all sin and all sinners. He cannot be otherwise than be holy. And therefore, our sin has to be dealt with in some way. It has to be paid for. And so Jesus Christ, his death on the cross, was a sacrifice and an offering to God to satisfy the righteous and holy anger of God so that God anger can be satisfied and we can be savable because of what Jesus Christ has done for us. That is the love that God has for us. God loved us and sent His Son. The Son loved us and died for us. Therefore, be imitators of Him and walk in love.